This week's episode is all about chess studying and improvement plans as it relates to the club level player. That's coming up. Don't move.
Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Thanks for tuning in. Real quick, I want to thank those of you who subscribed to our YouTube channel. If you haven't done so already, we would certainly appreciate it. And I want to thank those of you who left us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or your streaming app of choice. If you haven't done that already, we would certainly appreciate it. Now, just some context. This episode is about general, incremental, and realistic chess improvement. For example, maybe going up 50 points or 100 points, maybe going to the next rating class. Unfortunately, and I've mentioned this before, chess improvement is always put in the context of major rating increases or becoming a master. That's often the narrative. You either become a master or you fail. You either get to 2,000 or you fail, that type of thing. And that's not a good way to think of it. And it's also unrealistic. It's just going to cause you nothing but heartache. For improvement, you need to think in chunks, right? I want to go up maybe 50 points. I want to go up 75 points over a realistic period of time. But unfortunately, you have these people out there, I want to be a master in 6 months. How can I be a master in 6 months? I'm like 1,400 now and I want to get to like 2,200 in a year. Like, it just doesn't work that way. I think most of you realize that, but for some people, I just feel like they have these completely unrealistic goals. Now, there's that famous quote by the ball player Sam Ewing. I'm paraphrasing. He said something like, is it the hours you put in or what you put in the hours? Great quote. I'm paraphrasing. And I do believe that focused, targeted, and consistent study is much more important than the sheer number of hours. Now, again, this is focused, this podcast and this episode, on your typical adult improver who has a job, a family, other interests, other responsibilities. And by the way, I'm sort of on a mission to come up with a new term instead of improver. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm going to use it and I'll continue to use it. I'm going to use it in this episode. The term improver is such a part of the chess lexicon. I'm not going to use it, but in some ways, it's almost patronizing. It has this sort of label to it, like this patronizing, degrading, you're an improver. Congratulations, Bob. You are, wait for it, an improver. You get a sticker. You get to take a prize out of the prize jar because you are an improver. I don't know, maybe I'm taking this too far, but I just think we need like kind of a hipper, less, again, patronizing term. I don't know. That's just like a long-term sort of thought experiment for me. I think we need a hipper term than improver. I don't know. It just has a certain nature to it that I don't like, but that's just my own head. Anyhow, we of course need to make the best use of our limited study time, which we often can't control, right? If you are, say, a 35-year-old with 2 small children at home, or if you have a demanding job, maybe you have other issues. Maybe you're a caretaker, because some people frame it as, well, if you just would prioritize and find the time. Yeah, but many of us, we're in a situation where that's just how it is. And we can't control the time that we have for chess. That's just how it is. And I want to highlight 2 very important improvement ideas that we need to think about. Just my opinion, of course. The most important thing you can do, or definitely one of the most important things you can do and that you need to do, is to review your tournament games with an engine. I think that's so important, and you really need to be aware of where your errors are and look for patterns. Find those patterns where you're making mistakes. Now, a coach can certainly help you with that, especially if there are some erroneous thought processes. I'll talk more about coaching in a bit. but you need to not just review your games, and stop, let's say, at the first blunder, because a lot of people do that. Well, we don't need to go over it. I hung a knight on move 8 and you stop there. You might find out that maybe you had another idea, or a better example would be, let's say you dropped a pawn early on. You might think, all right, I dropped the pawn. I know where I went wrong. But you might find, if you look at the whole game and really analyze, that it didn't matter, or you might have had 2 or 3 opportunities where you could have won the pawn back. So these are things we need to look at. The other thing for improvement is that we need to eliminate bad habits. All right. It doesn't matter how much new material you learn. If you don't eliminate your bad habits, you're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. Okay. I'll use that analogy, because some people think they have to add stuff to what they know when it could be that you need to take away. Like, to use an analogy, there's some research on businesses and what makes them more successful and makes them more productive. And what they found was, it wasn't so much adding things or changing things. It was actually removing things that made the companies work better. It was trimming the fat, so to speak. It was getting rid of things that weren't working. It wasn't adding things. And I think that's true in chess, because regardless of how much more material you learn, how many more books you read, how many more courses you take, if you have these bad habits that are always plaguing you, it won't matter. And like I said, you're just going to be rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. Now, in a little bit, I'll give some examples of these bad habits that I see at the club all the time when I talk about chess micro skills in a little bit. So getting back to the number of study hours, yes, you need to put the time in. No one's saying that. Of course, you have to work at it. So don't take what I'm saying as, you don't need to study, or you just need to do it for 10 minutes a day. You have to put the time in. Of course, hard work is going to pay off. But I do believe, for those of us at the amateur level, that it gets to the point where the law of diminishing returns kicks in. Or at least it gets to a point where the number of study hours is making little or no difference in your improvement. So what I mean by diminishing returns, let me explain that a little bit better. If you're studying for a half hour a day, let's say, which is actually a decent amount, is studying for an hour or an hour and a half instead of a half hour a day, is that going to make a difference for a lot of people? Maybe. If you have more time, let's say you're putting in 2 hours a day, or you're putting in 2 hours every other day, whatever it is. If instead of 2 hours, you then change it to 4 hours, is that going to make a difference? I'm not sure. But like I said, I think there's something there with the whole diminishing returns thing. And you kind of need to find that sweet spot. I mean, let me give a few examples. When I played at the Queen's Chess Club, there was a retired gentleman, and he was saying, I have my routine. I wake up and I do these tactical things, and then I do this. He gave this really intricate study plan. And I'm wondering, this guy must be, strong. He was rated like 1100. All right. I'm not, criticizing that, but I'm just saying, from the way he was talking in this routine, I thought he was like a monster player. And it turns out he's been that rating for some time. This reminds me of, I should say, the interview I had with Nick Figueredo, National Master, where he was at my club. I mean, I must have been somewhere else doing the pairings, and he was listening to these 2 beginners, maybe rated 800, and they were discussing how much Caro-Kann theory they know, which is completely what they should not be focusing on if they're only rated 800. Yeah, you got to have some opening theory, but there's probably an issue with basic tactics and hanging pieces. But they were discussing how much Caro-Kann theory they know. All right, and then I was listening to something else. There was a gentleman, I think, who's already a strong player, like rated over 2,000, who's shooting for Grandmaster, who would get up at 4 a.m. every morning before work and would study chess. And, I'm thinking, I don't know, like, even the host who was interviewing him was almost kind of like busting his chops a little bit, like, really, is this sustainable? At least that was my interpretation. Now, for me, I know for me to get up at 4 a.m. before work, that just wouldn't happen. But also, that's not really good for you, right? Because just looking at a computer screen and all that blue light, that's very bad when you first get up. I mean, I would probably get a migraine if I tried that. And I wonder if that's really healthy or sustainable over the long term. Is he going to crash and burn? I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have nothing but respect. If you're getting up at 4 a.m. every day to study before work, respect. But I wonder over the long term if that's really going to make a difference. It's that whole diminishing returns thing, but I know for me, I mean, I'm already, up at 5:45 for work, which is crazy. I have to be at work at 7:40. All right. I have to be there at 7:40 and I do drop-offs in the morning. So I'm already up at 5:45 and that's criminal enough for me. That's like brutal, even if I go to bed early. So for me to get up at 4 a.m., that would never happen. So, I mean, I respect him for doing that. But when I hear guys doing stuff like that, I just really wonder how much of a difference it's making. I don't know. It's like I said, it's the whole diminishing return thing. And as far as the night before a tournament, I think the best thing you can do is simply rest and get a good night's sleep. That's much more important than cramming in chess study to the wee hours, getting only 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and then going to work and then playing. So that's just my take. So if you had a crazy day at work the night before a tournament, let's say the night before you go to the club, you're better off just chilling out, relax, spend time with family, watch a little Netflix, get a good night's sleep. You'll play better the next day than if you try to just force yourself to study. Just my thoughts on that. So now, does having a chess coach work? Do you need a chess coach? I think the answer is yes, in the right circumstances. I mean, you need to be comfortable with your coach. You need to click. The coach has to be able to patch up the holes in your game, and you have to listen and do the work. You have to be on the same page with your opening repertoire and your style. Like for me, for example, I'm a positional player. I can be tactical if I need to, but if I'm sort of interviewing a coach, if I'm looking for a coach and the coach is like, well, we need to make you more tactical, that's not going to work. I also need to be able to play my opening repertoire. I think it should be the same for you. I mean, the truth is all openings, and I'm not the first person to say this, all openings, and in fact, I think this is like a grandmaster quote, all openings offer chances at the amateur level. That's the truth. Now, I tend to favor certain openings more than others. I think for amateurs, certain openings are better for a number of reasons. I won't repeat things I've said already, but for example, I'm not a big fan of the symmetrical opening. I'm not a big fan of the Sicilian as black, that type of thing. But the truth is, you should be able to play the openings that you like, and your coach should be able to work with you on that, unless you're playing, of course, like unsound gambit openings. Like for me, the first thing I would say to a chess coach is this: I play the London as white. I mean, fine, you want to tweak it a little bit and maybe we'll add a few variations, but I'm not changing it. I play the London as white. Against D4, I play either the Nimzo Indian or the Queen's Indian. All right. Against C4, I play B6. And against E4, I play the French defense. And I ain't changing it. I would basically say that to the coach. And if they say, well, we need to turn you into an E4 player, thank you very much. It's really nice meeting you. I don't think it's going to work out. Have a wonderful day. I mean, that's what my response would be. I would need someone who would work with my existing opening repertoire, and then we would work on other things. Now, that's just me. If you're willing to change your repertoire, you could do it. But the point is, you have to be comfortable with the direction the coach wants to take you in. And the coach also has to be able to work on chess psychology and what I call chess micro skills. I'll talk more about that later. Those are sort of the practical matters. Now, the other thing with coaching, and this is an important point, and this is kind of why I brought up coaching. Some people think they're going to get better simply because they have a coach. Oh, I have a coach now. I have a coach. Hi, how you doing? I have a chess coach, right? It's kind of like music lessons. I'm a music teacher. I don't teach private lessons anymore, but I used to, and it's like someone, not just me, just, music lessons in general. Like someone will say, well, I'm taking guitar lessons, and they think just because they're taking lessons, I'm taking guitar lessons now, they're going to be like the next Eddie Van Halen or something, or I'm taking clarinet lessons, I'm taking voice lessons. And they think just because they're taking lessons, just because they have a private teacher, they're going to miraculously get better. Well, guess what? If you don't do the work, if you don't practice, you're not going to get better. But I think with coaching, some people get in that mindset. They think simply because they just quote unquote have a coach, they're automatically going to get better. And that's not the case. Now, those things I mentioned before about being comfortable and needing to click, and the coach working with your opening repertoire, as long as the openings you're playing are sound, sometimes those boxes are checked and sometimes not. That's why some players excel with a coach and some see little to no difference in their rating. I mean, there are players who have a coach, some have more than one coach, however that works, and they're seeing very little difference in their rating. Now, I'm not trying to be like a scutch saying that, but, we need to sort of have these uncomfortable conversations because that's the reality. There are people who have a coach, who have had a coach, I should say, for a long time, and they're not seeing much improvement. Now, does that mean it's a bad coach? No, of course not. It could be, but that's not necessarily the case. I'm just simply saying having a chess coach can often be a great idea, again, in the right circumstances, but it's not a guarantee you're going to improve. That's all I'm saying. Now, some people might get annoyed I'm saying that, but as I said, we need to sort of have these uncomfortable conversations. And if you're studying with a coach and not seeing improvement, you really need to analyze why that is. Now, is it that you need a new coach? Maybe you're just not clicking. Are you not doing the work and you're sort of in denial and you're saying you are and you're not? You really have to analyze what that's about. But I will say this, what doesn't make sense would be continuing to take lessons with a coach if you're not seeing improvement over an extended period of time. You may need to make a little bit of a tweak there. Now, this brings us to the next question. Do chess training programs work? And similar to coaching, I think, yes, in certain circumstances and depending on the person and his situation, depending on the player, I think they can be good. Now, I'm speaking about training programs in general, in very generic terms. There are a number of them out there, so I'm not thinking of any one in particular. So let me do this. Let me define a chess training program. What exactly is a chess training program? What do I mean by that? It could be an online thing. It could be an in-person class or some type of group lesson. It could be a book, right? Like the Woodpecker Method, or there was a book that came out a while ago called Rapid Chess Improvement. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a little controversial. I don't want to go on a sidebar and talk about that book. I'm not completely sold on it. It was pretty much exclusively based on tactics. And the Woodpecker Method is similar. I know a lot of you know about that. The Woodpecker Method, where you kind of take a set of tactical puzzles and you repeat them over and over. Each time you do the set, you do it in a shorter amount of time. So that could be considered a training program. Now, some of the online or in-person training programs usually involve a paywall. It's usually a paid thing, and they tend to be very prescriptive, right? You need to either do, let's say, a certain number of tactics, a certain number of game analysis. It could be analyzing your own game or analyzing classical games. There might be certain books you need to read and certain playing requirements, like you have to play a certain number of blitz games or classical games. These are just different ideas. So when I say chess training program, I'm just speaking, again, very generically in very general terms. It could be something from a book, like I said, like it could be like a Woodpecker Method type thing. That's just one example. Or it could be something online. And sometimes it might involve like a group thing, studying with other people. Sometimes it might be individual. So, what do I think? I think, again, as with coaching, in the right circumstances, and if it's the right type of player, I think it can be very good. But, as with coaching, I think that not everyone is necessarily going to see improvement. Now, as far as these training programs, especially the ones you pay for, because presumably if you're paying money, that might motivate you more. It's good if you need that push or if you procrastinate. And as I said, because some of them involve working with groups or teams, that could motivate you. It's kind of like if you want to start going to the gym and you have a buddy you go with, like each person sort of forces the other person to go. But here's my take on these chess training programs, all right? And this is going to sound a little cynical, but as I said, we sort of have to have these uncomfortable conversations if we're going to kind of move the conversation forward. So I wonder with these training programs, how many people are actually doing the work and completing the program as required before, say, moving on to the next level in the program or moving on to the next chapter in the book, whatever it is? Like, are they cutting corners? I mean, as with taking lessons, many may feel that they're getting better or they think they're going to get better simply because, quote unquote, I'm in a training program or I'm using this method from this book. You know, the truth is this is very hard to measure because this is all like anecdotal and apocryphal. Because let me give an example. Someone might say, well, I tried this method or I tried this training program and, you know, it's no good. I wouldn't do it. It didn't work for me. Well, did it not work for you because it's a bad training program or because you didn't do the work or because you just tried it for a week and you gave up? You know what I'm saying? And like, unless we have a way to actually empirically sort of study that, or if we have empirical evidence, there's really no way of knowing. So that's the question with these chess training programs and with coaching, is that there's this like self-report bias. So when someone says, oh, you know, it's not really working, is it the training program or is it the person? You know, did you really complete what they said? If you're supposed to do X number of tactics or a certain, you know, whatever it is, a certain tactical sequence, did you really do it? Or are you saying you did it? Or if someone says, well, this training program really helped me a lot, that could be true, but was it something else you were doing on top of the training program that sort of boosted your game, but you're saying it is the training program? Like, you know, these are things that you would almost have to have like a control and an experiment group to really know if these things are working. But as a general statement, again, I think these training programs, like I said, whether it's something from a book or online, whatever it is, I think they can be effective. But again, it really depends on the person and the person's work ethic and the person's needs. Now, before I mentioned chess micro skills, so what I mean by that are practical matters, right? These are some things away from chess theory that are necessary for tournament success. So based on my observations, these are the micro skills that club players need to work on in no particular order. So one is confidence, just, you know, believing in yourself, believing you have a chance to win. Because if you sit down to play a game and you're already not sure, it's like you've already lost the game before you've made a move. So that's a big thing. The other thing is clock management, which I see all the time at the club. I mean, it's a big, big issue. I know for a while it was for me. I'm definitely better at it. And when I say clock management, players either play too slow or too fast, because we think of clock management as like getting into time pressure. Like playing too slow is certainly an issue, but so is playing too fast. Let's take each of these separately. So players who play too slow, could be a number of reasons for that. It could be perfectionism, where you're just obsessing to the point of, you know, diminishing returns. Like I said before, you know, it's like the which rook scenario. Do I go rook A to E1 or rook F to E1? And most of the time, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, you have to check it tactically, or you're just obsessing over how to recapture a piece. Like, you know, you could take back with the queen or you could take back with the pawn, let's say. And many times it doesn't matter, or, you know, it should be fairly obvious, but you're just obsessing over minutia, or you're taking forever on move like 3. Like things like that, especially in faster time controls, those are going to really hurt your game. Or it could be almost like you're just a little too paranoid about things. That's something you definitely need to fix. Now, playing too fast, of course, is a major issue as well. There are a lot of reasons why people play too fast. Some of it is ego. It's like you're trying to show that you're just so smart that you don't need to think. Some of it is laziness. I'll talk about that in a minute. But playing too slow or too fast is a huge issue. Clock management is big because you don't want to play so slowly that you're constantly in time pressure, but you don't want to play so fast that you're constantly blundering and making mistakes. So clock management is big. In fact, you probably should fix that before you fix anything else, because if you have clock issues, nothing else is really going to matter. All right. As far as tournament chess, the next thing is This one is big, and this drives me nuts when I see this, okay? You have to have a consistent and regular opening repertoire. You need to know exactly what you're going to play for your openings. What I mean by that is, if you're white, you need to know exactly what you're going to play. I'm going to play E4, for example, and however your opponent responds as black, is he going to go into a French Sicilian? You know exactly what variation you want to go into. As black, when he plays E4 or D4, whatever it is, you know exactly what you're going to play. Find your opening repertoire that you like, develop that. And I know that takes some time if you're just getting into tournaments. There's some trial and error. But you need to get to a point where you have an opening repertoire that you're comfortable with and stick with it. Stop this like experimenting. I'm going to try this opening. And you need to give it some time. Like what some people do is they'll play an opening for a couple of weeks and be like, well, I don't like this opening. It's not working for me. You need to stick with an opening for a period of time to really know if it's working for you or not. Okay. But many players, they bounce around too much. Play the same openings and stick with it. And what's going to happen is also when you analyze your games, because you're playing the same openings, you're going to become more familiar with the patterns. But I'm amazed at how many players at the amateur level, it's like white, let's say they have the black pieces, white plays E4, and they're like scratching their head, like deciding what to play. Drives me crazy. You can't do that. You need a consistent and regular opening repertoire. And then what happens is you're going to get comfortable with that. And then you can spend the limited study time you have working on other things instead of constantly having to, work on your opening. And then, it's just like a brush up thing. Like once you have your set opening repertoire, it's just a brush up. Like, for me, I mean, I know you're sick of me saying this, but you know what I play. I play the London is white. Against E4, I play the French. Against D4, I play the Nimzo and the Queens, yada, yada, yada. You know that. And I stick with it. Now, I do spend some time studying openings and variations. I still review it, but I don't have to spend like an inordinate amount of time on it because I have a developed and, a set opening repertoire that I stick with. So with the study time I do have, I can spend it on tactics and like middle game strategy and like end game things, analyzing my games, that type of thing. But I'm just amazed at how many amateur players don't have that. They don't have a consistent and regular opening repertoire that they can rely on. And I really think that's going to cause you a lot of problems. So that's huge. I know I'm kind of, maybe being a little dramatic here, but I just think that's such a big deal. I mean, for me, that's almost cringeworthy. Like a player, again, like let's just say they have the black pieces. Their opponent plays D4, and they're scratching their head what to play. Or even if they have the white pieces, right? Black starts the clock and they're like wondering what to play. Now, I know you might say, well, maybe that's just a technique to psych out the opponent. Yeah, but I don't really think that's what it is. I just think, you need to know exactly what you're going to play as white and as black. And going back to clock management, you're also going to save time on your clock that way. And going back to confidence, you're also going to be more confident because it's an opening that because you play it all the time. That's huge. Next thing, you need to keep your composure in worse positions. Too many players get frustrated. They basically like throw their hands up in the air and they just basically give up. They fold up their tent. You can't do that because no matter how much you prepare, no matter how hard you try, no matter how talented you might be, you're going to face worse positions. That's just how it is. And the difference between the stronger players and the weaker ones, the stronger players keep their cool in those worse positions and they find a way. Okay, next thing, as far as chess micro skills and sort of like bad habits and things like that, is lazy analysis. All right, players get lazy. They don't look at all the responses. They basically just look at one response from their opponent. Well, if I do this, he can do this. You got to be careful with that thinking because if you do this, there might be several things he can do. Well, if I take his knight, he has to take my knight back. Well, maybe not. If you take his knight, he might have like a checkmate or something like that. And unfortunately, they only look at like one response. You have to look at the whole board, understand the position, and not just be lazy. All right. But that lazy analysis is all too common. The other thing which kind of goes along with that is only thinking offensively. That's a huge problem. Amateur players hate to defend. or a lot of them do anyway. That's what I observe. They only think about their own plans. It's just pure offense, and they don't want to defend. It's almost like they're annoyed they have to defend. That's a bad place to be. That's a bad headspace you want to be in. And the final thing, and this sort of encompasses a lot of the things that I just mentioned, patience is huge, okay? A lack of patience is a big deal, a very big deal. And, there's a famous quote, right? Lack of patience is probably the biggest reason for losing a game or drawing a game who should have been won. I think that's a famous quote. I'm too lazy to Google it right now. But I think it was Bent Larson, maybe? I don't know. But that's a great quote, right? I think I'm paraphrasing, I'm butchering the quote, but it's like lack of patience is the main reason why players lose a game or draw a game that should have been won. Great quote. Now, speaking of patience, let's talk about that a bit. Let's spend some time talking about the importance of patience in chess. All right, so let's talk about patience and waiting moves. This is something I've spoken about previously. I've mentioned that waiting moves are hugely effective at the club level. Now, what do I mean by a waiting move? Maybe those of you, or some of you, I should say, didn't listen to my previous episode. A waiting move is basically a move. It's a nothing move where you're almost taking a pass, right? It's a tricky position. Neither of you knows what to do. And rather than force things, you sort of just make a harmless move. Like you might shuffle a bishop or you move a pawn. It's basically a nothing move that doesn't really change the nature of the position. And it's almost like you're passing it off to your opponent like, okay, I'm going to make this move. Nothing's changed. Now the ball's in your court, and I'm hoping that you're going to make a mistake. So rather than force things, it's almost a way of taking a pass. All right. And it can be very effective because if your opponent really tries to force things and isn't patient himself, you can win the game. And this is a very, very effective technique at the club level. And just as a general statement, not every move has to be fancy or like a feel-good move, right? Because at the amateur level, right, we like checks, we like moves that attack things or where there's a clear sort of offensive purpose. But not only is that not required, very often it might be incorrect. And simply just being patient and sort of waiting for your opponent to make a mistake can be very effective. And especially like these waiting moves are especially good in complicated positions where it's clear neither player knows what to do, or it seems like all your candidate moves seem to be losing. So it's just a way of sort of not forcing things and passing the ball off to your opponent. All right. Now, I'm going to give you a big secret of chess improvement. All right. This is advice you may not find anywhere else. You don't need to study with a grandmaster and, to find this out. I'm going to give you like this big secret. Okay. You ready? Here it is. When a piece is attacked, okay, so someone, let's say, moves a knight that attacks your queen, 90% of the time, the correct solution is simply to move it to safety. Just move it to safety. But everybody's looking for like these fancy intermezzo in-between moves because, I'm studying this course that's all about tactics and I'm doing these tactical puzzles. Or I saw this YouTube video where they said to look for these kind of moves and da-da-da. Simple defense is often best. Stop trying to get too fancy. Yes, you have to look for tactics and other ideas. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, though, 90% of the time, when somebody attacks one of your pieces, just move it to safety. That's it. Your rating will shoot up 100 points, okay? Following that rule is going to improve your rating more than reading 100 endgames you must know or taking like the latest course. I'm just amazed that, why am I saying that? Like, what's the point of me saying this? Because so many times players try to get too fancy. Like a piece is attacked and they feel they have to look for like this crazy tactic or complicate things. And the thing is, most of the time when your opponent is attacking your piece, it's probably a useless one move attack anyway, because he's not sure what to do. So he attacks one of your pieces. And guess what? When you simply move it to safety, he now doesn't know what to do and he could make a mistake. So moving it to safety can actually be a very strong move. Usually when you make a move that attacks a piece, it somehow improves the position of that piece anyway, or it leads to some other like follow-up. But when a piece is being attacked, like I said, just move it to safety, or in some cases you can just, trade the piece that's attacking it. Just simple defense is often best. That's what I'm saying. Simple defense is often best. I'm not saying, to not look for tactics and other ideas. You have to. And those moves are often winning. What I'm saying is, in probably 80% of positions, there are no immediate tactics that exist. Because the problem is when you study these tactical things online, or you're looking at puzzles or books, those are hand-picked puzzles, right? They all have a tactical solution because you're studying tactics. But in positions where there are no tactics, that's not going to help you. You need to study those positions as well. And I'm telling you, when a piece is attacked, just most of the time, the correct move is just simple defense. Either take that piece or just move it to safety. Simple defense is often best. And so many players, they end up losing games because they try to get too fancy. I mean, following that rule alone, just playing straightforward chess, right? A piece is attacked, just move it to safety, right? That's going to boost your rating like more than any book you'll read. All right. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of hyperbole in what I'm saying, but I think you get the idea is that, quite often there's really no need to be so fancy. All right. So last thing, just a few thoughts on some resources that may be overlooked or underutilized, because let's face it, with the online stuff, everyone is just playing blitz instead of studying, or they're studying 20% of the time and playing blitz like 80% of the time. And I'm not really sure how that's going to help you. So just a few things real quick. On chess.com, the lessons are outstanding. And just based on anecdotal evidence, I feel like a lot of people aren't utilizing them. And I don't think they realize how good they are and how valuable they are. So if you go on chess.com, then you click on learn and then lessons, they're outstanding. And the stuff that is on there is amazing. Now, I'm dating myself. I used to do these exercises before chess.com was online. It used to be called Chess Mentor, and it was back on CD-ROM. You actually had to buy the CD-ROM, put it in your computer. That's when I first started using it. That was sort of the, genesis or the beginning of some of the things that are now on chess.com. But what I like about the lessons now, when you go online, and some of these lessons are videos followed by exercises. Some of them are just exercises. But what I like is that there's written prose that explains the position, and then you get feedback on your response. There's also hints. So there's a lot of written explanations that go along with the positions, and they're just fantastic. I mean, and there's ones for everything: openings, tactics, like your favorite players. And I just think it's fantastic. Like I said, I've been using it for years, even before it was part of chess.com. And I just think a lot of people don't realize how good they are. So I really encourage you to check it out. What I might do in a future episode is, actually, this is a good idea. I'll do an episode where I discuss like my favorites and I'll talk about them at length. That might be a good solo episode for the future. And also Puzzle Rush, most of you know about. I think that's a great warm-up. I don't think it should be the basis of your study plan or your only study plan, but I think doing a little Puzzle Rush each day, as long as it's not excessive, is excellent. I think it's a great warm-up. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with, there's a book I spoke about in a previous episode. It's called Practical Chess Exercises by Ray Chang, and it's just outstanding. But the thing with this book, it's a puzzle book, but it doesn't tell you whether it's a tactical solution or a positional solution. It simply says white to move. And it's not always tactics. It could be a positional thing. It could be something you have to defend. And that's much more realistic than simply giving a puzzle and saying, well, there's a tactical solution. Because by telling you it's a tactical puzzle, half the work is done for you. If you know it's tactics, you're going to look at, checks and captures and things like that. Or if it's if I tell you it's a mate in 3, you kind of know what to look for. But if I simply say it's black to move, you don't know. Is it a tactical thing? Is it a positional thing? And that's what this book is, Practical Chess Exercises. So that's going to do it for this week. As always, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Be sure to give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate it. You guys are the best. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.